Welcome back to the new Yachtsman channel. Today I've got a guest who has great experience in boating and not only in larger yachts, but he's got a long history of maybe what would be a starter boat for a lot of new yachtsmen. And Chris also has a great background in the Great Lakes and the canal system that gets you there. So let's get talking to Chris. And Chris, why don't you introduce yourself and let us know how you got into boating?
Hi, I'm Chris, and I use the word Seabuddy to add to my name, so it's Chris Seabuddy Brown. And I got into boating. Basically, my uncle bought a house that had an old rowboat, and he said to me when I was about 8 years old, "Paint it and caulk it, fix it up, and it's yours." And I did that, and had several summers of fun on the Barnegat Bay in New Jersey, sinking it and rowing it, and even putting a little outboard motor on it.
That's great. And I saw in your bio that you actually wrote a cruising guide.
Yes, I did. I had a cruising guide on New York waterways and Lake Champlain. It took me 4 years to write it. I was a newbie, and it turned out to be a thickness of an old Manhattan telephone book of where to go, where to stay in New York waterways.
I imagine the research for that project was probably a lot of fun. I think writing a cruising guide probably requires you to be on the water for a long time.
Not only on the water, but in the shoulder seasons in upstate New York, I would go by car and go to the secondary and third great restaurants at each port so that I could give commentary. If you didn't like this restaurant or that one, we had a choice. And also what to see and do.
Why don't you explain a little bit to the new yachtsman what that waterway does? Where is it bringing you from, and what's your destination?
Well, the book includes the Hudson River and the canals of New York State, which is the Erie, the Champlain, uh, and all the waterways there. And those waterways are controlled by locks in order to raise or lower the level of boat to the waterway coming out at you. And so there's quite a few walks you go through, over 50. And at the same time, you're going through magnificent orchards of apples and uh, various other fruits, and seeing all the small towns of mid-America in New York State.
And then where do you come out? Is that Lake Erie where you come out?
You could come out on Lake Erie, and you can come out on uh, the Champlain Canal ends up at the Thousand Islands, right?
Ah, Thousand Islands. Gotcha. Gotcha.
St. Lawrence River.
So one of the questions I'm often asked by people is, how do I get started? And, not a lot of people go from not having a boat to buying a 70-foot yacht. What's kind of your advice for a first boat for a successful person who just wants to start in family boating?
Well, I think that you got to look at what you intend to do with the boat, but beyond that, I tend to focus on below 26 feet as a first boat, whether it be a center console or a cabin cruiser, something that you could handle yourself, uh, and you could learn about boating, and you can go from your local marina to various destinations around.
And what about power or sail? Do you think there's a real advantage in starting out as a sailor, or do you think power boating is fine to get
I
started?
am almost exclusively power, and I do that because um, the sail was just too independent of conditions that would allow you to move. If I'm cruising, I'm trying to do 70 miles in a day. given cruising hours, and I need power in order to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think unless you're in the trade winds, really going through the islands and stuff like that, sailing is just too unreliable to do things like the Great Loop and stuff like that. Although most sailboats have a motor, I really think that a power boat is the best way to get started. It's
Well,
less to learn.
one thing you want to look at in going through these canals is you have bridges, so you have clearance issues. So in a sailboat, why there's a lot of sailboats that go through the canals, they take and they unstepped the mast and they mount it on the deck so that they have about a 15-foot clearance of going underneath a low bridge.
Gotcha. And what does that cruise look like if you come from New York and you're going to Lake Erie, and you're, seeing things along the way? What is that time frame? Is that 2 weeks? Is that a month? What does that feel like?
Well, generally you're going at near idle speeds or just above it, so it takes you a while to go through all the locks and so on and so forth. Each locks takes about 20 minutes or so of getting everybody in, getting everybody tied up, and then having the water level change. So you're looking at a good couple of weeks in order to go through the Erie Canal and go out on the Erie river or various lakes. There's also another canal that takes you straight up from the Hudson called the Champlain Canal, and then eventually through other canals and other waterways takes you to Canada.
When you're cruising in these canals, so you think you plan on maybe 50 or 70 miles a day kind of thing?
You're gonna be averaging about 10 hours of running time, and you're gonna be running about 6 miles an hour. So you can figure 60 miles as a rough estimate.
Gotcha.
Now you want to try and get a meal in there somewheres, unless you're cooking on board. I often would stop and go into a marina and have a lunch. So I do a little less than 60 miles a day.
And what time of year I know it gets cold fast as you go north in the spring. What time of year would you advise a new yachtsman to start this journey? Is this an April thing or is this a May thing?
The only thing you want to look at in the spring of the year that's a limiter is there's enough rain as they open up the canals for the season uh, that they flood them. And so you're better off going in July, August, or September timeframe.
Okay.
September is starting to get kind of chilly. You might wear a jacket at daytime.
So do they actually close the canals in the winter because of ice and water conditions?
Yeah, they close it because of ice and they drain them in New York State.
Gotcha. And that probably happens in November, December or something?
Yes, that's a good time.
Yeah. Have you done much boating up on the Great Lakes?
I went through 4 of the 5 Great Lakes and enjoyed all my time up there too.
What would you say is really different between coastal cruising in the saltwater and cruising in the Great Lakes?
Well, I think that from a again here you're talking about sail versus power. On the Great Lakes, you usually have a wind, so it'd be good to have a sailboat, and you have long stretches between ports. Whereas in a powerboat, every once in a while you have a lay day, which means that it gets a little too rough windy wise to go out that day and go to the next port.
Yeah, and the ports are much further apart than they are on the eastern seaboard, aren't they?
Yes, except Lake Michigan, as through the years, has built artificial marinas all along the coastal part of Michigan.
What about the new guy with a larger boat and hiring a captain? What's your recommendation for training and captain's license and using a captain?
Well, I think that in terms of a captain is you're starting to talk about twin engines and maybe more than that. And you're going to get to the point where a brand new person's not going to be comfortable with it. Brand new person's better off with a single engine boat. And captain is perhaps going to be a liveaboard captain, or you might get a day captain just to take you for the given day, someplace you want to go.
What about sea school and captain school? What are your thoughts on a new yachtsman starting by?
Brand new people need a little more experience than taking those schools. Those schools are good after they have some seat time in a boat and they want to improve their skills.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you get your feet wet with a smaller boat, learn what you don't know, and then you'll get a lot more out of the schooling. So where do you boat now? Where's home for you?
Well, I live in Annapolis, Maryland, and I don't own a boat currently. What I do is I've belonged to two antique and classic boating clubs, and they have events, and I ride in other people's boats,
Oh,
which
that's
is such a
great.
joy.
That's great. So you don't have to take care of your own boat now. You've got access to great classic boats. Tell me about that group with the classic boats. Are they mostly wooden hulled restored vessels?
They used to be anything built before about 1994 is considered a classic. So there's a lot of fiberglass and aluminum boats that are coming into those clubs, and fiberglass is a way if you want to use a lot of cruising time to cut back on doing it in a wood boat.
I know that Annapolis area just has a great history of yachting, and I think it's one of the few places where you'll still find a wooden skipjack or something in operation.
We just had one of the clubs just had a show on all the Chesapeake Bay built boats, which are all wood. Most of those were on the eastern shore in like the St. Michael's area.
Yeah, that's great. That's really fun to go to. I'd encourage a new yachtsman to go to some of these classic boat shows. It's really, really a luxury item to be able to afford actually to restore, maintain, and operate one of these old wooden boats. And there aren't many people that can do it anymore.
Yeah, oftentimes there's enough of an industry that restore the boats and you can buy a fully restored boat and it's cheaper than buying a new boat.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when the boat hasn't been maintained, the cost of buying the boat that's in bad shape is almost zero. And it's just a question of how many labor hours it takes to get it back. But for the new yachtsmen, I think they should stay newer. And it's interesting to see these things. But as a new yachtsman, you don't want to learn how to restore a boat at the same time you're learning how to operate it. That's for sure.
No, I think you get one that's already been restored.
Right, right.
The club belongs to 400, 500 members in the Chesapeake Bay area, and those guys are always selling their boats uh, because their health is deteriorating, and you get some good bargains that way.
And what's the name of the club again?
Um, the Chesapeake Bay chapter of the Antique and Classic Boat Society.
Okay, great. We'll put a link to it down below. And then,
There's one up in the Philadelphia area also called Mid Atlantic Classic Boat Society.
gotcha.
Both clubs I belong to. In fact, we just finished having a little bit of a show where we had boats on land and boats in the water. And we had a situation where anybody who wanted to could don a provided life jacket and rode in a 36-foot Chris Craft cabin cruiser up the Delaware River.
Oh, that's great. That's a
Yeah,
beautiful area. You'd never know that Delaware River was such a beautiful area when you see the waterfront in downtown Philadelphia. It's amazing what 20 miles does up that river.
yes.
So where else have you done some boating? Have you been down to Florida and Caribbean?
Well, for a while, I had an interest in trying to buy new boats, and I would buy them in Florida and drive them on their own keel, as they call it, up to where I lived in the Northeast, whether it be New York or whether it be Annapolis.
As a delivery captain, so you're just moving it for the owner,
I'm moving it for myself.
for yourself. Gotcha.
I've done that trip. It's about 1,300 miles in a 26-foot open bow rider boat. Just had a toilet on board.
Did you stay on the intercoastal? Or did you run out offshore sometimes?
I did both depending on the weather, and I would stay at a marina and either get a motel room, or sometimes at the marina somebody would be there on their boat and they'd say, "Here, come sleep. We got an extra cabin for you."
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, met a
So,
lot of nice friends.
so that's probably a 2 or 3 week trip on the intercoastal.
Yes, I would allow 2 weeks.
2 weeks. That's great. Well, what other advice would you have for the new boater?
Well, I think that you don't know what you're looking at. You've bought houses before, but you haven't bought a boat before. So underneath those conditions, you probably should have it what they call surveyed. SAMS, the Society of Accredited Marine Surveyors, is a club, if you will, of different surveyors, and they will, for a fee of a couple $100, give you their expert opinion on the condition of the boat. And if the condition is such that it requires some money to be spent, uh, you can then argue because you're doing this before you actually have bought the boat. You're going to argue that some of this should be paid for by the seller.
Yeah, and I know that most insurance companies now require you to have a survey. So, new yachtsman out there, you're going to survey a boat almost certainly, and that is an independent third party that's trained to look for things in the boat, very much like a home inspection, but I would say much more thorough than a home inspection.
Yeah, again, a group like Sam's has the knowledge of that. I had a little wanderlust and I went to the Bahamas in that same 26-foot open boat one day, and went to Bimini and came back again.
Wow, that's uh, that's pretty adventurous. I guess you trusted your engine that day.
I waited over about a 10-day period of time for the right weather. Single engine boat, new boat. And during that 10 days, I had broken it in, if you will. And engine breakdown wasn't an issue. It was weather, because it was an open bow rider boat on the Atlantic Ocean.
Do you have just enough fuel to get there and back?
No, more than enough fuel. I get filled up just before I went, and that size boat can make that trip. It's a little less than 50 miles each way.
Yeah, I've done that trip on days when I didn't want to be out there and I was in a much bigger boat. So that Gulf Stream was pretty unforgiving.
Well, during that trip, I had an interesting thing. I had a dolphin that wanted to play peekaboo with me. So as I was cruising along, this dolphin comes running up, taking a dive as if he's going to hit the side of the boat, and of course dove directly underneath it. Very playful.
Yeah, I think the dolphins are so smart that they've learned that the boats aren't going to hurt them. And sometimes they're a food source. I know that when I'm fishing, they're always standing by waiting for me to let something go or a piece of bait falls overboard and they're just right there. And it's amazing. They're so smart that you never hook one. They know if even a live bait has a hook in it.
Also, I spent some time on the West Coast, and I used to go from Los Angeles to Catalina and back.
Oh, that's great. That's a
That's
different
about
world
a
out there.
25, 30-mile trip.
Did you
Did
do
a lot
that?
of scuba diving off of Catalina. Very clear water.
little rougher over there, isn't it? They've got bigger swells and things than we're used to here in the Atlantic.
It can be. There's times that natural harbors have to be cleared out in preparation for a storm. But that wasn't the days that I picked in order to go boating over there.
Well, thank you very much. That was interesting, and hopefully this discussion is going to help some of you new yachtsmen out there.
Good. I'm glad to do it.
Thanks again.
You're welcome.
Please like and subscribe, everyone, if you found this interesting.